Broadcast has been set.
Thank you. The time is now 5:01. I call to order the June 13, 2023 Policy and Governance Committee meeting. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Albert Cerrone Rees. I am the chair of the Policy and Governance Committee and the student member of the board. It brings me great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, the final Policy and Governance Committee meeting for the 2022 to 2023 school year. I look forward to all the discussion today. And I want to thank everyone who is here today, our administration staff who's joining us today for tonight's meeting. And we will start with introductions, starting with board members, administration staff, followed by board office staff and legal counsel.
Good evening. This is Board Member Walter Fields, Vice Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee. It is great to see everyone this evening.
Good evening, Pamela Boozer Strother, District 3 Board of Education member and member of the committee.
Good evening. This is Robin Wash, Director of Government Relations, Compliance and Procedures. And then I'll give it to Vincent. He can introduce himself.
Good evening. This is Vincent Curl. I'm manager of the safety office and I oversee the AED, bleed stop, and other safety appliance issues.
And then Tracy.
Good evening. I am Tracy Jones. I'm the supervisor for the Office of School Health, and we handle all medical issues within the district.
All right. Miss Adeline.
Board staff.
Sorry, Cindy Allen, Board Office Secretary.
Good evening, everyone. Dennis Whitley III with the law offices of Shipley and Horn. We are board legal counsel.
Thank you, everyone. So may I have a motion to adopt the June 13th, 2023 meeting agenda? There's such a motion.
I move to adopt the June 13th, 2023 meeting agenda.
Is there a second?
Where's the second?
All right, it's been properly moved in second. Any objections? Here-
No objections, Mr. Chair, but I would like to add something to the agenda under section 5, items for review, and that would be policy bylaw 9250 for discussion.
Which policy is that?
That's bylaw 9250, policy for administering legal expenditures.
Okay. Looking at the agenda for tonight, I am open to adding it for discussion. Keeping in mind that administration doesn't have enough notice to add their perspectives and comments. So to at least start the conversation, I'll be open to allowing it into the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Cindy, if you add that in, it was bylaw 9250.
Okay, for this one, it shows attorney. Is that the one you're referencing?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm adding this upon the recommendation of Ms. Welsh per legislation that was passed in the last legislative session in Annapolis.
Got it.
Do I go ahead and amend my motion to approve the agenda with the addition of?
Bylaw.
Help me out.
Yeah, I got you. Bylaw 9250.
Yeah, I amend my motion to approve the agenda with the addition for discussion.
Thank you. Alrighty.
Did you second it, Walter?
I will second. I was waiting for the chair to ask, but second.
It's been moved in second. Any objections? Hearing none. Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on, approval of our committee meetings. May I have a motion to approve the May 16th meeting minutes?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second,
It's been properly moved and second to approve the May 16 meeting minutes. Any objections? Hearing none, motion passes and minutes are approved. Public comment, there are no public comment registered speakers tonight. We encourage the public to submit pre-recorded video, audio, written, or come speak live at next school year's meeting. But alrighty. Legislative update, Ms. Welsh, I don't think there's a MABE legislative update.
No, there isn't.
Thank you. And Ms. Boozer-Struther, do you have an update?
I do, for Blueprint, the update is that our plan has been approved by the AIB, and we will move forward from here. It's now posted on the website, and of course, this is the team of Dr. Libby and the Blueprint implementation team responsible for all that work. So I'm excited for that. And one thing that's outstanding is we do need to schedule the board. We do need to know which board meeting this will be presented in. I'm sure we can get that information soon. I think that's it, unless Mr. Fields would like to add anything.
Well, just one correction. I think the plan was approved by MSDE. I think the AIB approval is not coming until July because there's a backlog.
Oh, thank you for that clarification.
yeah.
Yes, MSD.
And yeah, and that's a real, we should be proud of the fact that our plan, passed muster with MSDE. I'm quite sure it will with the AIB, but the public should know that there are some difficulties in Annapolis right now around the coordination of governance over the Blueprint, and that it's being delayed a bit because there's an ongoing issue between MSDE and AIB, the Accountability and Implementation Board. And hopefully that will be worked out, because districts, including ours around the state, have done a lot of work to try to be in alignment with the Blueprint. And so if you're a member of the public, I would encourage you to contact your state legislator and urge them to be vocal to make sure that these issues in Annapolis can be resolved, because there's a lot at stake with the Blueprint for Maryland's future, and we can't afford to have any significant delays, further delays.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. And I just want to concur that, these moments are, can be quite undermining of the public trust. And we have already gone through one already under the former governor with the actual launch of the AIB. So we do need to stay diligent on these moments in time where it looks like the coordination is not there, because from our vantage point for PGCPS, and I'm sure other districts could also, probably agree from their vantage point, we've been implementing with fidelity and with focus and results. So, we cannot risk some of this political issues getting in the way of these funds getting directly to our students. So let's stay diligent on that. Thank you, Chair. That's all for me.
No, thank you. Appreciate that. I appreciate the update and the information for the public. I do want to recognize Board Chair McKinsey Murray, who has joined us, and Board Member Dr. Miller. Thank you. All righty. Moving along, we will now move to policies for discussion. So tonight we have 4 policies for discussion. So first up is policy 5168, which is the automated external defibrillators, AEDs. So I'll yield to Mrs. Welsh.
So with the AED policy, if you recall, at the last meeting, we had received a public comment regarding having the AEDs, having more AEDs at the elementary school that were at least equal to the amount we have in the high schools. And I think several of you asked different types of questions related to accessibility and how quickly people could get to an AED. And with the size of some of the elementary schools increasing, is there a need for additional AEDs? And so after going back and listening to the video, to the tape of our meeting and everything, and looking at everything, I asked Dr. Golson if it would be possible to ask Vincent Curl, who's the safety officer, and also Tracy Jones, who's the supervisor of school health, to come and really be available to answer your questions and talk about the whole issue of the how many ADs and the appropriateness of location, those types of things, and whatever other questions you might have about the ADs, because these two are the two that can Vince can tell you more from the operational standpoint, and Tracy can tell you more from the health perspective. And then from there, then we can talk about whether or not we want to add any additional language. So Vince and Tracy are here. And so if you want to just ask them some questions that relate to your concerns in terms of the number as well as locations and accessibility, that would be great.
Robin, if I may, I'll start off here with just a little history of our AED program. When I joined the school system back in '69, we had no AEDs. It wasn't until unfortunate incident in one of the state schools regarding an athlete having a heart issue that the state mandated that a AED be in every school that had interscholastic activities, sports teams. So at that time, and it predates my taking this position, at that time, my predecessors put 3 AEDs in every high school. One outside the main gym, which was mandated, one up near the main office or the nurse's station, and the third one was a portable, which was to be carried out on the field for games or on the buses for away trips. Now, we did not have middle school athletics at that time. Later, middle school athletics was added, and again, before my time, it was decided to put 1 AED outside the gym, just like the high schools, and 1 as a portable. So that was the limit of our AED deployment. Subsequently, I tried an initiative to get AEDs in other places. I was helped out by a number of people, the offices. I got a donation from athletics, Earl Hawkins, of 12 Zoll AEDs. We put those in the offices. We put them in the bus slots as well. And the last thing to be funded was AEDs for the elementary schools. Now, at that time, and I believe it's still true, there were 130 elementary schools. We made a mass purchase of 130 cardiac science G5s, which was the state-of-the-art unit at that time, and it's still my favorite. And we put 1 in every elementary school. The logic behind 3, 2, and 1 is part state mandated and part funding mandated. These units cost between $1,500 and $2,000 each to purchase and mount in a building. And after that, there's an annual cost of $300 per unit for maintenance. So we didn't only look at the size of the buildings, we looked at the probability of using them. And we thought in the discussion that the most probable place would be offices where we have older staff members and high schools. Next from that would be middle schools, and probably the least frequent need would be at an elementary. But I'm actually proud to say I initiated that elementary program. I had no funding. I was in with the COO at that time, and he asked me what we could do. And I said, well, I'd like funding for 130 AEDs. And that's what we did. And we've been holding that model ever since. 3 for the high schools at minimum, 2 for the middle schools, and 1 minimum at each elementary. Again, it's not just based on size, it's based on size plus the probability of use. We've had a number of saves that I'm proud of. One most notable was that when Park, a young basketball player, was down there on a Saturday, he fell out on the floor. A person from the stands and his father and the athletic director responded. They got the AED right outside of the door, and they administered CPR and a life-saving shock, and they were able to save the kid. And he walked out of it later with no lasting harm. So they're definitely worth the investment, even if you just save one life. I've talked to Ms. Jones about the number, and I believe you could always use more, but you have to be practical about the expectations of you know, what it's going to do for you, how much more is it going to do for you relative to the expenditure when it goes to buying them and then maintaining them. The training right now is what I would focus on. We have the ability to hire an outside vendor to come in and teach our students that we have done this year. For just the CPR alone, that costs us about $60 to $65 per student. Now that could be done in-house if we were to add staff that train. And I believe historically we had a dedicated person that did this training. And subsequently it's I don't believe as active as it was once time. And I think that the pandemic kind of set us back a little. So we're still recovering from that. And I'd be glad to go through any of these individual questions if you'd like.
And may I also add that I've spoken with Robin, there is a safe school module on AEDs that I have viewed. I do believe it would be a nice asset and could potentially replace having somebody to come in and teach the staff, especially since most of our AEDs are automated and will tell you exactly what you need to do, when you need to do it, and how you need to do it. So that, you know, could be a way of educating our staff members.
And you're correct. We've had that discussion. And I have one of these automated ones behind me. You open it up and it automatically starts talking to you, telling you what to do. It's fluent in English and Spanish. You push a button and it changes languages. And it's a very nice unit. So I like the training with safe schools. You know, that's I'm a fan of online training. I'm a bigger fan of in-person training, but online is certainly adequate with these modern AEDs that literally walk you through the process. And then any other questions? We do track these, by the way. By law, we've hired a company, Rescue One, and they go around and service these annually. They're in the process of going to all our schools over the summer. They will replace batteries, the electrode pads that actually deliver the shock, and anything else that they see in their field visit. The time to get to a victim, of course, is critical. And if we were to add to our stock of AEDs, I would look at adding to more sprawling complexes or complexes that have 2 or more floors. And we're already doing that a little bit this summer. We were able to get some funding for 10 AEDs. We're going to put in the larger buildings to supplement what's already there. An example would be Blainsburg with 5 floors. Well, that needs more AEDs than a small elementary, for example. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, colleagues, the floor is open for discussion. I'll start with Vice Chair Fields, followed by Board Member Brewster-Strother.
Thank you, Skirl, for that explanation, particularly around the allocation, because I think there was a lot of concern about the elementary school situation. And so hearing that is probability of use clears up a lot. I do think building size we have to keep in mind, as you mentioned. And on the training, I would concur. I think if we create some sort of requirement for training, perhaps at the beginning of the academic year. And I think about what happens when you step on a cruise ship and they go through the drill of putting on your life vest so that everyone truly understands what the device can do in that, because oftentimes in a moment of crisis, you know, even though the machines may be automated and they're telling you what to do, little panic sets in. If you've never been in a situation where you had to provide aid to someone in an emergency, you want the person to be as calm as possible. So I think if we could create that training requirement, and if it's online, that would be great, but I think it has to be unified across the school, across the school district, so that no matter the building, everyone understands how to spring into action when a crisis emerges. But thanks for your explanations this evening. They've been very helpful.
You're welcome, quite welcome. And I concur with your assessment. You know, I think the online training would be the best first step that we could do and execute quickly.
And then all of the nurses are CPR AED trained, and they are required to do 8 healthy activities a year. They do bloodborne pathogen training. And so, you know, this could be one additional training that we could add to them, that they go over and show everybody how to do the AED, whether it's in a staff development center or staff development training or something of that nature.
Thank you for that, Tracy. And to add to that, all our security officers are trained, they're required to be trained, and all our coaches are required to be trained. So this would supplement what we already have. Thank you again.
Board Member Boozers-Feather.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. I just want to thank you for this detailed information. I learned a lot just now, and I appreciate it that I, you know, now would be a better informed board member to talk about the AEDs. And, you know, my question was because I have two very large elementary schools, the newer built Mary Harris Mother Jones, and of course now the new Cherokee Lane, which is massive. I mean, it feels that way. Is that length from the farthest reach of the building to the office where this may reside? And if we have to start looking at 2 in those large buildings, and it not just be about just because it's an elementary school. So everything you've explained tonight is very helpful, that it's just a matter of you know, running that analysis. At times now that we're building these massive the middle schools, I'm sure you have seen the 6 new middle schools. They're of a size totally unexpected. Like, they're so big, I can't even, I totally unexpected in some ways, you know, but very exciting. 1,200 seats in these schools. So I think it's just numbers, distance, and
Agreed.
an analysis, and we need to add some more, and the board needs to be aware of that. So, but this is great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this information. Thank you, Chair.
You, Ms. Welsh.
So I wanted to ask a question, Vince, because I'm looking at your chart that has all the schools, and I know you originally had told me like high schools have 3 and middle schools have 2 and elementary have 1, but that's not always the case. Looking at some of it looks like you have already individualized the location of AEDs depending on, and how many per school, depending on how the school is laid out and what the needs are. So just in the instance that where Board Member Boozers-Feather was talking about like Cherokee Lane and everything, does your office or whoever, or operations, whatever, do they go back in and reanalyze that and say, you know, in this particular school, there's a need really to have 2 or 3? How does that come about?
Well, you know, our general format is the 3-2-1, and we could easily add another one to say like Cherokee Lane. And my suggestion would be 1 on the first floor at one end of the building, 1 on the second floor, more towards the other end of the building, and that would give you better response time. And all it really requires is an agreement for funding of this, knowing that it's $2,000 per unit to buy one and $300 a year after that. But I would certainly concur that you could use more if the funding was available.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my question to the committee is, in terms of any language changes, if I don't know if you would want some type of language that might also say evaluation of needs based on number of students and structure of building or something.
Committee colleagues. Ms. Boozer-Strother, followed by Vice Chair Fields.
Yeah, I would agree with that, that we have to have that, the flexibility clause written in there. Thank you.
Vice Chair Fields.
I would also add Mr. Curl's explanation about the data, the probability of use. Because I
okay.
think that's really important, given the fact that we know for high school athletes, there's probably a greater probability that you might need one of these units than there is for an elementary school student. Because the one thing that I want to make sure that the public understands the why behind it, that it's not just sort of a naked decision, that there is some science behind it that justifies the number of units given the cost of the unit and the budgetary implications.
Okay, I will definitely include that too.
Thank you, colleagues. Any other comments regarding the policy? If not, Ms. Welsh, if you could prepare the policy and bring it back August 22nd.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Alrighty, moving along.
And in closing, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys and explain what we're doing. And if we can be dismissed from the rest of the meeting, we'd appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Beth.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck to everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ms. Welsh, as soon as Adeline, your hands. Cindy.
Oh, okay. So my question was, are we gonna bring it back for action or discussion?
For action. Alrighty. Moving along. Next up is our new policy, geographic boundaries of attendance areas and a consolidation of schools. Mrs. Welsh.
So at our last meeting, we had talked about adding some language related to actually Board Member Briggs when he brought up several different concerns, both in terms of notification to the public, notification within the school, making sure like staff and teachers and administrative staff know that the school's being closed or relocating the attendance areas for the school. And then also the uniqueness of certain populations and the uniqueness of those populations. So if you go, Cindy, if you want to put the policy up, and then we can just scroll through and you can see the changes I made. If you'll go down to, I think it's page. Oh, there's no page numbers on this one. Okay, well, where it says standards, the beginning of standards. Keep going just a little bit further. Wait a minute. Somehow this is not the correct version because it doesn't have I included for 13 unique student population. I can tell you what I included. I don't know what happened to the correct version that I sent, but I did add unique student population because we had spoke about that. And then under E, if you go down to E where there was the question about if you can keep going. So yeah, so it doesn't include stop, go back to not E, but go up one sec. Oh, 2 E's. Okay, this first E. So instead of adequate, that was a concern because it didn't really state what did that mean? Adequate is broad terminology. And so I added the language I have, and we need to post this, is notice must be provided to parents, guardians of students and attendance areas of all schools that are being considered for closure by the board in a timely manner so that parents are informed far in advance of the final decision. Because I think that was the concern that he shared when the parents that he spoke to did not know, like it was like they heard it was a recommendation back in October, and then the next thing the decision was made, and their children were going to a different school, and it was like, how did this happen? You know, it happened so quickly. So I put that language in there for that. And then the other thing he talked about was that when parents went to the school to ask school staff, well, what's happening to our school, or where are we going, or those types of things. Several of the parents did not know where several of the staff members could not answer that question about, was the school being closed, or were we moving certain students out? And so I did say that, let me see if I have it here for the staff. I wrote, a coordinated release of the notification of the board's decision will be provided to school administrative and teaching staff. That way they all know exactly what everyone knows at the same time. And so, because oftentimes parents will read something, but they actually do depend, their relationship is with the school. So they'll go to the school to find out the details. And so that way we can ensure that that in the policy that the schools are informed in a timely manner also, so that they can be answering questions for parents. So those were I think the three main, and I'm not sure what happened to the version I sent to Cindy, but those were the three main changes I made based on what Board Member Briggs had suggested. And I think all of you were in agreement with those changes. You had said, go ahead and put his suggestions into the policy.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh. Colleagues, floor is open for discussion. Okay, I'll go from Vice Chair Fields to Board Member Briggs.
Just on the issue of notification, I think even the language in a timely, if you said timely manner,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we need to be even more specific, because that's also very subjective. You know, for some people, if you did it within a month, they will tell you that was not enough time, and whether or not we need to put a specific time period in there so that people would know, well, within 45 days of a decision for the closure of a school,
Okay.
the public would be notified. Because I just think when you don't have a specific time there, there's always going to be a complaint that I didn't know, or this was last minute. And I think if we're more clear, that will help people in terms of making their personal decisions.
Okay, I can do that.
Mr. Fields, the only concern I would have is that if it's noticed at a board meeting and the board does not make a decision at that particular
Wow.
meeting, it may reduce the amount of time it would have to be renoticed. So I don't know if you can have a hard and fast number of days. That's just something to think about.
Or maybe we say something to the effect that we have a clause that addresses that situation, Mr. Whitley, that says 45 days, with the exception of, instances when
Carries over. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll work with Ms. Welsh to see if we can come up with some language.
Okay, that's not a problem.
Board Member Briggs.
Thanks so much, Chair Smarties, and apologies for being off camera. I'm actually getting back from work. Hopefully you all can hear me. Apologies for being late. I just want to say thanks, Ms. Welch, for adding in those additions, and I agree. I think this is particularly important, especially now, because I believe Dr. Wilson said yesterday on the kind of end of year call that he had with all the staff, there'll be additional boundary changes in high school. So I think that unique population piece will be even more important. But I do know that for most of the K-5 schools, I think this is like the last phase of transitioning from K-5 or K-6 to K-5 only. And that's what I was referring to when I said unique population. So kind of a sixth grade population. I think it captures a lot of other students. So I wanted to say thank you for that piece. Also wanted to mention that I agree. I think that we don't want to kind of box ourselves in with the language. And so around the adequacy or just adequate time or notice, the parents are mentioning that, as I said, October, there's kind of the first recommendation, and then from there, the final decision was made in December. So however that fits into kind of the legal language, I think is probably what's most important. But I wouldn't want to do anything that would kind of box us into kind of making sure that we are going above and beyond and giving notice, but also not being able to stick within the kind of process that exists in policy. I'm going to stop talking now because I think I lost my train of thought because I'm on the train. So I was trying to figure out what I was saying. I was trying to buy time to figure out what I was trying to say. So I'll just come back off of you when I figure out.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, you're there. If not, I'll move to.
I'm so sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I think the point that when Board Member Fields was talking about the time frame, and I know that sometimes when you say in a timely manner, it could be interpreted different ways. I wonder whether we should consider, instead of putting it in the policy, to let the operations side put it in the admin procedure so that they can determine what seems to be reasonable when we talk about a timely manner.
And we could certainly do that if that's what the committee would prefer.
Yeah, I guess I'm always in a situation where we don't want to box ourselves in, and then we're like saying we're going against policy, and that's not the intent. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And then Board Member Booster's other.
Thank you, Chair. I think, what I want to say after being in this for the entire 2 years, the information was provided in many channels in many ways. And I think part of the issue was, was sort of that forced delay, pandemic and full board. We didn't have a full board and we didn't have representation in every community. So there's a lot of this process that I think the communication was really strong. And I think parents were showing up and administration was sending letters to the homes. And they were very clear. It seems like this word recommendation kind of caught people off guard, that it wasn't an actual, I'd have to go back and read that, why that word caught people off guard this time, where they thought when we voted on this, that it wasn't a done deal. So that's on me to understand why that happened. But, the other thing is that I experienced around communication, and it is true, it is very difficult to get an entire building with the same knowledge on this. When we were going through swing space for Hyattsville Middle, to have each of those feeder schools on the same page around what buildings the students were going to, we unfortunately had to split among 3, made that a little more difficult. But even going into year 2, when we dropped Meadowbrook and everyone was going to be in 7th and 8th would be in Goddard together, to get the feeders to stop saying students were going to Meadowbrook was really difficult. This was was really a learning opportunity for me to understand that. So what I would say to everyone is, this is diligence. It is us as board, it is our PTOs, PTAs, PTSAs, it is the principals. It's almost like every principal should be like, okay, principal, here's the facts, test your staff, make sure your staff knows, because we were combating this information over and over and over again. And the one thing I found that undermined it was the lack of trust that we're going to finish these buildings on time. And when we finish these buildings on time, which we're about to, the trust will go up. So when we say, well, the Hyattsville Middle is opening in July, no one believed us. I mean, it's just a fact. I couldn't convince anyone that the difference was that these builders aren't getting paid until they deliver buildings and there's incentive. Like, so there's lots of lessons learned, and I wanted to put some of those out here. That I thought there was a lot of I just want to say, I thought there was a lot of communication. I think there's just some factors that we as leaders need to be aware of, that the future CEO, that principals need to be aware of in this process to make it go more smoothly. And especially if we are going to tackle high schools next year. And believe me, the families in the high schools with boundary changes, they know. They came out in force. I was in the meetings, and they're ready for this. So we have to keep it up as board members. The information is out there. Thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely, thank you. Colleagues, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ms. Welsh, if you'll take into consideration the recommendations, I think we just need to bring it back.
So can I just ask some clarifying questions? Because I sort of feel like I received several different lines of how to go forward. So we talked about a month, like a month, like 45 days of closure with exceptions, that language. But then we did talked about the fact that maybe we want to put that in the AP instead of putting it into the policy. And then board member Mr. Strother did talk about, she thought the communication was strong. So I'm just curious, where do you want to go with this? I can do any one of those things. I'm open. I just want to make sure I'm clear about what you would like.
Vice Chair Fields.
I made the suggestion about the time designation, and I would agree. I think putting it in a procedure perhaps would create, greater flexibility and not put us in a bind. So I'd be in favor of language to that effect.
Well, then I will have it ready to come back for the August meeting for action.
Thank you. All righty, moving along, policy 5125.4, which is student data gathering. Mrs. Welsh.
So this policy, and if Cindy can put it up online, because there's a lot of change. There's a lot of changes to it. So the policy statement, I did incorporate the fact that we do think it's important for both our own staff as well as researchers and community partners at times to be researching and analyzing our data and everything, because ultimately it can result in improved quality of educational programs. But then I also incorporated the fact that the board, though, recognizes the responsibility to protect the privacy of students, parents, and employees, so that when we are dealing with data, whether it comes from we're using data in the administration of an external third-party research study, or any research study that we might do internally, also even on our instructional programs or courses which require questionnaires or surveys, and also the administration of protected information surveys and collection of disclosure and use of personal information for marketing, sales, or other distribution purposes and certain physical exams, then we want to ensure that we have protected the privacy of our students, parents, and employees. And I'm going to talk 1 minute just about that number 3 if you go down here where it says, go back up. I'm sorry. It's under the policy statement where it's right there. There's a 3 in there. And it says the administration of protected information surveys and the collection, disclosure, use of personal information for marketing, sales, or other distribution purposes in certain physical exams. So there is a law that we have not really addressed in any of our policies or procedures, and by law we are required to address that. And it does, and it goes to our data, to the data of our students. And it does require that we have parents, either the approval of parents, or if the student is 18 or older, that the student approves the disclosure of any of this information. And it does require, the law does require that we have that sitting in policy as well as in, and then our administrative procedure would also be revised to address that. So since the name of this policy was informed consent, student data gathering, and I'm not certain that we really do very much in terms of doing surveys, especially for marketing and sales. I still felt like we need to put it in since we are required by law to include it. And this just seemed like the right place to put it instead of having a separate policy. So that's why you'll see that section there. And then the third policy statement talks about the fact that when we're doing research, whether it's internal research, evaluation, and assessments, or even people who are doing external research, that it's critically important that we do it to high standards of methodology rigor so that we're providing valid and reliable information, specifically to the effectiveness of our educational operational programs. So we really want our data when we're doing analysis and everything as we talk about our programs to make sure it's valid and reliable, and we can feel good that that's what it's telling us is really what it's telling us. So those were all of the policy statements. And then the purpose was just to provide the guidelines in order to move forward. So I did add a good number. If you scroll down to the definitions, I did add a good number of definitions to the policy that we did not have previously, just to make sure that it's clear. And I'm not going to go through each one of those, but it's really to make sure when anyone reads the policy, they can understand it by going back and looking at what the definition is. And I do want to take you to two areas. One is personally identifiable information. If you keep going down further, well, first, personal information. If you look at the definition there, that is actually coming from the PPRA, which is the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, which they define. And they're saying that information includes the student or parent's first and last names, a home or other physical address of the student, a telephone number, and social security number. So that falls under personal information, which also can fall under personally identifiable information, which is also much broader. So I wanted to ensure that we had both of those in, because the personal information is referencing the PPRA, which we have not referenced before. And then the other one that's important, if you go or scroll down to K, is protected information. And it's where they're gathering information from students related to these particular areas. And I can see how we would be in situations where maybe people would want to know what are the political affiliations of our students, or are there any mental psychological problems, sexual behavior, illegal antisocial, self-incriminating, critical appraisals, all those types of things. So that chunk of information is considered protected under PPRA. And therefore, we can never release any of that information unless the student, if the student's 18 or older, actually gives written consent, or else the parent of the student were to give written consent. So that is all spelled out in this policy. And then the policy goes into, if we go to standards, if you scroll down to standards, Cindy. And this is a broad area. It's basically saying, what are the things that need to happen in order to release, access, or use data? And so it lays out the very specific areas in terms of whether you're doing a testing, surveying, questionnaire, opinionaire, whatever. The fact that if the person is doing research, an application must be completed. And then it would go to the Division of Accountability, who they review and then they'll authorize, they'll come up with a determination. And if you look on our website, there is a whole section that does address that whole process. And then So that just lays all those things out, and then it's broken out into, now this is very similar language to the previous policy that was there as far as the internal research studies program courses and activities. I've changed very little of that. I reformatted it, but it's really pretty similar. And then external third-party research studies, and what has to happen in order to be able to for them to be able to do that. And then and the whole piece of informed consent. And also when we're looking at any kind of researcher that's coming from the outside, it's really important. The language here talks about the fact that they want to make sure that that you want to make sure actually that the first of all, that we know who are the researchers. Secondly, the objectives of the research project and the procedures, how they're going to go about doing the research project, so that, you know, we really truly understand what that is, the purpose of each procedure in the research project, anticipated use of the results, a statement of benefits reasonably that are to be expected, and then what the participation, how that would be in terms of the student, and if the student does withdraw, confidentiality is a very big piece that would be a part of that. And then the fact that they need to be answering any questions that that the superintendent or the board might have. And then the very last section, D, administration of surveys and physical exams, marketing of personal information, inspection of certain material. That whole section then lays out the specifics from the PPRA, which is really is just in line with that, which we are supposed to be doing a protection of pupil rights amendments. So it talks about making sure we have prior written consent, and that that making sure that the parent and the student knows that they absolutely can opt out. They don't need to even if they decide they are going to do it, that is going to be a part of the survey or the survey, they still can opt out. And then also the fact that they can inspect if they want to any of the protected information surveys, the results, the instruments that were used. So it's really about transparency and making sure that the parent and the student are fully aware of what's happening if in fact they were to give consent. So that is sort of it in a nutshell. I know that if you felt that if you wanted to have more specific information about what happens in terms of researching and everything, I'm certain that Doug Strader would not have any problems either himself or bringing someone from the research office or testing office come to talk about that if you do have questions. So that's basically it.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh. Colleagues, floor is open for discussion and or comments. Vice Chair Fields.
I only have a question on the third-party research. Do we require that the institutions are accredited? Because accredited institutions have to adhere to certain research guidelines and protocols. So I don't know if we need to define that as policy or administrative procedure. Because
Okay.
we could be approached by there are independent public policy groups, there are, independent organizations. Do we want to make sure that we are allowing institutions that have some sort of control mechanism within their profession, like a standards within their profession, before we give them permission to conduct research with the district?
Okay. I can certainly check into that and then also incorporate some language in there.
Thank you. Any further comments, colleagues? Chair Mickens-Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Robin, I just want to thank you for all the work you do and how you're protecting our children. I mean, this was really thorough, and I appreciate that. So I just want to lay that out there. People think this work is easy, but we know it's not. So thank you for the time and energy that you spend.
Thank you.
Any further comments, colleagues? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Welsh. And we will move along, and this policy will be brought back for action. Okay. So final thing forward discussion is the amended, the item that was added today by Vice Chair Fields, which is bylaw 9250. So I'll yield to Vice Chair Fields.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to put this on our agenda to discuss as we move forward, because as you know, legislation was passed, House Bill 1079, which directed the district in the manner of paying legal fees for board members. And we have to make some revisions to our policy to be in alignment with that new law. So I just wanted to make sure that we have that on our agenda for our August meeting so we can begin that process.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. So what I'll say is we will definitely add it into, well, let me see if it's in the work plan. Second. Okay, so it's not in the recommendations.
We can add it.
By Dr. Wilson, but we can add it.
We can add.
So we will add that in. Thank you, Vice Chair Fields. Alrighty, that's it for policies for discussion. So now we have two policies for review or action. That is policy 9360, which is meetings of the board. So start with, if I have a motion to forward the revised policy to the full board to seek public comment.
I make a motion to move policy 9360, meetings of the board revisions to the full board for consideration for public comment.
Second.
It's been properly moved in second. Oh, now you have the floor, Ms. Welsh.
So at our last meeting, we had just a few recommendations for for changes in the policy. And so one of the things that you brought up, because you had been, I think, in an SBA conference, and they talked about prayer in board meetings. And so I did go back and I again listened to our video to try to get better clarification for where you want to go with that. And I'm not 100% sure what an SBA told you, but I did do some research on my own, as well as I spoke with Dennis and I spoke with our OGC. And overall, there's no the law is basically that we really shouldn't be doing outright praying in the board meeting, only because of the fact that it does students, although it's not compulsory to be at a board meeting. We do have students that come to provide public comment. We do have students who come sometimes because they're getting awards at, when you have different awards set up and everything. And so that means then they are sitting through a prayer. However, there are ways to get around not actually doing an actual prayer. And so what I put in language, and I am open to suggestions. I did talk to Dennis also about this. I did put an invitation to participate in silent prayer, where you would then just at that moment say, we'd like to take a moment of silent. And then it's up to a person. If they want to pray, they can. If they don't want to pray, they don't have to pray. So I don't know if that sort of meets what you learned in that SBA.
Yeah, yes, it absolutely does. And I think it was the issue of compulsory, that it appeared compulsory. And so providing the public the ability to participate if they so choose or not, and a moment of silence certainly gets around the issue of prayer.
Okay. And then the other thing that you recommended was the community recognition. Right now we call it shout outs, but just, but you don't, someone said, well, we might call it something else in another year or something, but at least it's, the whole purpose of it is to recognize the community. So I did put that in, and if you have a different language you would like to use, that's fine too, but that was sort of to address what you had said previously. And then I did want to point out something, if I can find it here. When this went through, OGC reviewed it, Sally picked up one area, and it had to do with in the closed session. I don't think I can find it. And this is such a massive policy that it's like, or a bylaw that is trying to find it, is sometimes a little difficult, and I should have marked it. It has to do with when you go into to the a closed session, that you is important to announce why you're going into the closed session prior to the meeting and then afterwards. And we do lay out in this the bylaws all the specifics of what are all the possible things that you could discuss. But this we did not have anything about basically giving the public notice that this is what you are going to be doing. So I did want to, and it is under closed. I'm just trying to find specifically, but that was the other thing that was added, and that was it. I think that was all we had talked about previously.
Vice Chair Fields.
The only other issue in terms of the agenda, the order of the agenda, I had spoken to the chair about this. If there's a possibility to move up the public comments in a board meeting, because I think oftentimes, the public sits there and it becomes a very long evening. Or even if we have student speakers, to allow them to speak first, because our board meetings are on a school night, and to have students there very late, I think sends the wrong message. So that would be my only other comment.
Board Member Booth.
Okay,
I
thanks.
was unmuted. I thought it was unmuted.
I should help you out. So I agree with moving up public comment above wherever it would be. That would always be above our business, like when we have our special reports from policy committee and otherwise. So if there's something to be logically done with that, I'm in agreement. And then on the silent, but right now you're saying that invitation to participate in silent prayer, the word prayer is still there. I would ask for like prayer and reflection, just another word that's not prayer.
Okay.
So I asked my colleagues to comment on that as they would like to. Thank you.
Agreed.
I as well. Thank you, colleagues. Any further discussion? Chair Mickens-Murray.
I understand the controversy around prayer. I personally like it, but I can support the position of this committee because I understand it. But I just wish there was a way that that we could make it a positive thing rather than a negative thing, I guess, is what I'm thinking about. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think always taking the position of prayer is not good for kids. I just believe it's a mistake. So I just want to say that. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Miller.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I I was grappling whether to say anything, and I think I want to first get an understanding. I know there's a board prayer that we say, and it's not really, one of faith. It's just a board prayer, very simple prayer that I hear other boards saying, very similar, if not the same. And I'm wondering whether we would consider thinking about saying, for those who wish to participate, we're going to say the board prayer, or you can engage in silent or reflection or something like that, so that we cover for those who do want to pray, for those who don't, for those who just want to do it silently.
Vice Chair Fields.
So, my thoughts on this as a practicing Christian is I'm always concerned about whose prayer is being recited, given the diversity of the community. And I think it's why even in Congress, you now see a practice of having a chaplain or an imam come in. They try to make sure they have a diversity of faiths if you're going to have a prayer. And I think it's a slippery slope by just saying the word prayer. And I think that's where the legal issues can come into play. And I think, if you look around the country, I know I was shocked when I joined the board and we did a prayer, because that's not the practice in New Jersey with school districts. They for most part don't do that. And I think it's because of this legal issue. And so, I agree, I believe in prayer, but I'm just always careful about, there is always a very exclusionary aspect in it too. And at a time when we're trying to make sure that we are an inclusive school district, I would always opt for the policy that is the most broad and inclusive as possible when we do something like this.
Yes. Mr. Welsh.
I do want to say that when I was doing my research, so they compared school boards to then other legislative groups, like, for example, like even our county council. And again, the big difference has to do with the fact that, and even in that scenario, if you're like in the county council or any other legislative group that has a meeting and they are having a prayer, it has to be non-denominational. It cannot support any type of religion. And really the only purpose of the prayer is to say, guide us and direct us as we work together in our decision-making, and that's sort of really what our board prayer was saying. I think the biggest concern that came out on the cases I was reading as it relates to a school board has to do with the fact that you do have students that are present, and they are because of whatever it is. I mean, they have a right to come and give public comment. They have a right to come and get like awards and stuff when you're giving out different awards or recognizing certain students or whatever. And from that standpoint, then it no longer, if you do the prayer, then it's no longer a choice, because a student is then required. And I think that is the big difference between the Board of Ed versus a regular legislative group that's meeting. So.
And if it's a silent prayer, the student can pray. They can pray their own prayer, so that way it's all inclusive. It's a silent prayer. You pray to your God or your religion. So it's silent. It's personal to you. It's not being forced upon your beliefs aren't being forced upon anybody else. And I think you can keep the word prayer in there without it being offensive, because it's silent, as opposed to recognition.
Chair Mickens-Murray.
Thank you. I support silent prayer versus having nothing. So I would support invitation to participate in silent prayer.
And one more thing, it's an invitation. So if you choose not to do anything, you're free not to do anything as well.
Okay, so committee colleagues, how do you wish to proceed? I know we just threw a lot to Ms. Welch.
If we accept the change, I mean, if the other committee members agree with that,
Yeah, I think we move it.
right? That's what I think too. Thank you.
So we move along with invitation to participate in silent prayer. I see Ms. Bustreller's hand.
I would like to move it if we do. I mean, am I hearing agreement for silent prayer or reflection? Okay, all right. The other, and Judy, I just want to say I agree with you. I know, you know, our many of our students, families, staff, you know, this is very important to them, and I see that too. And honestly, the biggest cheers during graduation speeches were after prayers that our students said. So I think we cannot ignore that and need to keep prayer here. I did want to ask my colleagues if you're comfortable with the notice for virtual meetings. I reread that section and it's 48 hours, inclement weather, 1 week, if not, given or change of, I'm going to make sure change of venue, because we just ran into that. So I just wanted to make sure we review that again to make sure we're comfortable around the opportunity to change venue. And maybe Ms. Welch could review those aspects of it again. Thank you.
I agree. I agree, because that was a big issue. Yes, thank you, Pam. I agree.
So do you want me to go through it a minute? So, okay, so it was that at least previously it said at least 1 week's public notice is required to change an in-person board meeting to a virtual board meeting. And then the question came up, well, what about when you have inclement weather coming up and you know, you won't, you know, it's like, you know how they predict it, and you know that in another day or two it might be really bad and you couldn't have the meeting so in person. So then the language that was added was an exception to the 1 week notice requirement would be in cases of an emergency such as public health or inclement weather in which 48 hours is sufficient notice. So because I do believe that's what the committee had talked about, 48 hours.
Ms. Bustrell.
That I agree with that section, and then I think it's number 2 above where we also need to look at, and if we want to distinguish executive session from public session, because executive session is not as inconvenient to the public if we change the venue. So we may have more to this than we realize. I'm sorry. But
Yeah, and I agree with that too, Pam. So thank you. Yes.
So let me make sure I'm straight. So are you saying well, I guess it's what you need, the committee needs to decide if you want to include that language in for the closed session, or so that you would then be able to go into closed session virtually.
With a change of venue. Well, or even with the change of the location, because it's a closed session.
Yeah, it's number 2.
Number 2, right.
That if the board is in agreement to change the location of executive session, is feeling like something new we should consider, because we ran into it again this week without sufficient 2 weeks. And I feel like we've run into it in the past, because there are times when we want to add executive. Yeah, I mean, I think around these, if we're going to be having more retreats, I could see this coming up again. So I know I'm now expanding this to something new. So to distinguish that.
So just so I'm clear, you're saying at the language we have included for the public session, we want to incorporate that into the closed session also in number 2.
Well, that it would be distinguished separately, that like say, you know, end that session, you know, in the case of executive session, if the, you know, majority of the board agrees, and in the, you know, majority of the board agrees of a
Something
change
along the
of
lines.
venue. Yeah.
However, executive session may be, the date, time, and place of an executive session may be moved with 48 hours notice if agreed upon by a majority of the board members. Something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Whitley. I like that.
I do too.
Did you get that, Robin?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, I see two hands. Are those for further comments?
Mhm.
Ms. Busuttil?
Yes.
Chipfield.
Sorry.
So my question is on the exceptions, because we say in cases of an emergency such as public health or inclement weather, do we need to have some language in there that speaks to other public emergencies? Like there are, any number of things that could happen that would interrupt a scheduled meeting, just to give us some leverage. And I say that from the experience of living in New York City during 9/11.
No, and I appreciate that, Mr. Fields. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Whitley, didn't you put in a definition of emergency in a policy?
That was my recollection as well. I was about to say.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
trying to figure, is it in this policy? Because maybe that's what we do.
I believe that it was this policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have the definition of emergency meeting, but we don't have necessarily a definition of emergency. So we could add a definition of emergency.
Are you sure
Okay.
policy that we added a definition for emergency?
Not in this particular policy. Maybe we added it somewhere else, but I don't see
Okay.
Maybe
it.
we need to find it.
Okay.
Dust it off.
Yeah. All right.
Dr. Miller?
I just want to add, and I totally agree with putting in those provisions so that we are able to call meetings offsite or giving the 48 hours. I wonder whether we want to box ourselves in. When we have a definition, then we're bound to what's in the definition. And I'm going to give the example of our public health with COVID. We never would have anticipated that. And it was never in the policy. So I wonder if we should do something like such as, but not limited to, because there could be, like you said, any number of things that could happen that we would never anticipate or predict would happen.
Typically, the definition would be illustrative as opposed to limiting. So that's the approach we would take, that, these are examples of the types of emergencies, but it's not a fully inclusive list.
Yeah. Okay.
We can do that.
Thank you. Dr. Miller? Okay,
Sorry, I'm putting my hand down. Sorry.
no worries. Alrighty, colleagues, any further discussion on this? Seeing none. Ms. Welsh, I believe we will bring this back for action.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, no, actually, it'll be sent to the board. My bad. I'm a little tired.
So do you want the changes made and then just automatically sent to the board, or do you want to come back and see? Okay.
And it's to the board.
Yes. So, colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding the now revised policy 9360 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, motion passes and policy will be moved to the full board. Next up, we have policy 6139, which is test security and data reporting. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward the revised policy to the full board to seek public comment?
So moved.
Is it properly moved? Any second?
Second.
It's been moved in second. Now you have the floor to Ms. Welsh.
So this policy, which we did discuss at the last meeting, is basically, it is almost word for word from COMAR. It meets all the requirements that COMAR requires in terms of test administration, both for state mandated assessments as well as locally mandated assessments. And of course, the purpose is to make sure that the testing results are secure, they're also valid and reliable. And then it also talks about reporting the test data, which in the law with COMAR, it clearly lays out what our requirements are to report the data. And so we want to make sure it's accurately reported. So the revisions to the policy really included the standards for the administration of the assessments, then the standards for the accurate and timely collection, storage, and retrieval of the assessment data. And then also the development of annual training protocols for staff participating in the in the assessment administration and data reporting. So that was it in a nutshell.
Thank you, colleagues. Any questions? Seeing none. Any objections to forwarding the policy to the full board? Hearing none, policy will be moved to the full board to seek public comment. That is it, colleagues, for policies for review and action. Next up, we have committee recommendations or new business, which tonight we will be discussing the work plan for school year 2023-2024. As a part of the development of the annual P&G policy work plan, the CEO is required to advise on policies for creation, revision, and adoption. So Dr. Golson has shared her recommendations, and along with Ms. Welsh, we have concurred that would be an asset to share with them prior to the close of the school year. Dr. Golson has shared multiple policies that are recommended and required for revision or creation because of prior, board discussion or changes in state law this past session. And so with that, I'll turn to Ms. Welsh.
So I basically went through and identified policies that I discussed with Dr. Golson related to ones that are very old that really do need to be updated, first of all, ones that have been there and that we haven't addressed yet, and then ones that we have discussed. I will point out that the parent, family, and community involvement policy I put on the list because in the PCAC meeting, they were interested in having that revised. And it's back in 2012, so it's 11 years old. So, I think it's appropriate to look at that. Also, our education equity policy, if you read that, it tells us that it should be reviewed every 3 years. That is in the current policy. And so that one is 2019 and we're in 2023. So we're a year behind. So we'll get that policy updated. And then because of the whole issue with opiates and overdosing and drugs and fentanyl, and the fact that so frequently a lot of foods can be laced with fentanyl, and if students aren't paying close attention or they can run into access, and like there's often events and stuff where parents might bring in food and you just don't want to take a chance. And so in talking, I actually had spoken with Tracy Jones, and she felt that we probably need to revise that policy. Again, that was done in 2011, so that's 12 years old. And I think we should be bringing it more up to date, especially with some of the things now that we're dealing with in the schools. Another one has to do with safety programs. And I hear often parents also in public comment talking about concerns for safety in the schools. And that particular we don't really have an overall global policy that really addresses our concerns for safety and security in the schools. And that one talks about ensuring that people aren't in accidents in the schools, but yet it's broad and it sort of talks about safety in the schools. So certainly we want to set it up so that no one's like tripping, falling, or hurting, getting hurt or anything. But also I really think we'd be remiss if we don't address safety in a policy, just because I think it's a number one concern for parents and staff. And then we have some other ones that were sitting there before that we really do need to update. And I'm trying to think what else was there. Oh, I do believe that board member darn it, I can't think of her last name, the liaison of our PCAC, she asked for, I think she had asked send you an
Madam
email.
Stafford.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Anyway, and she asked for us to look at core curriculum resources, and I believe that board member Mickensmore, you did say, oh, yes, we can address that in this upcoming year. So I went ahead and incorporated that in there. And then we did talk about the fact that that non-discrimination, we want to go in and revise that policy so that it's much more, right now it's very limited and it's not broad, and it does address a lot of areas, one being recruitment of staff. So and then by doing that, then we would be able to rescind the employment recruitment policy, because we would then address that as equal, so that we'd have a language that talks about equal employment opportunity people. And then so then that's sort of it for this group of policies. Oh, service animals in the school, that came from Office of General Counsel, because that is often a need of certain students, and we have nothing that except for using animals like for dissection and stuff in biology classes, we don't really address that. So that is one that OGC did recommend that we do. And then the ones on these under ones for rescission, several of those are we talked about employment, all the boundary attendance, boundary changes and closing school buildings, all of those, once the current boundary one we're working on gets finalized and we give it a number, then we can rescind all of these, because that one we're working on right now does encompass all four of those. And then we have language in the policy that talks about, we have a policy that talks about appeal process for student transfer requests. And actually in the student transfer policy you just worked on, it talks about the ability to appeal. And this past year, you also did a policy on appeals for 4205 appeals, which the student transfer appeals would fall under 4205. So there's no reason to have a separate policy when you already have a policy addressing those things. And then appointments, that one too would need to be revised, because this past year you did a policy on appointments. So there's no reason to have a second policy on appointments. So most of these rescission ones are really just to get rid of duplication, so that we just have basic ones. Now, I did add, and I do apologize, Board Member Fields, because I didn't pick up about attorney's fees, but I do. If you look under the policies really after the 2023 legislative session, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 recommendations based on House Bill 1079. At both, so Parent and Community Advisory Committee, there's language in 1079 that talks about the need to make sure that all your representatives, that you have diversity, that it reflects your population within your school community. So that's one area that, and we don't have any language in that policy that does include that. And then there's now the increased voting rights of the student board members. So we'd want to revise that. And there's actually a whole section for the board chair in terms of now the responsibilities of the board chair. And then there's extensive information about professional development for the board members. So I did include all those, thinking that would be important to do that. And then purchasing, House Bill 543 did increase the limit. This past year we did August, actually the beginning of this school year, we did the purchasing policy, which we had increased to 50,000, and now it has been increased to 100,000. So those are just based on the legislative session. Then component 3 actually is administrative procedures that need to be completed. And talking to Dr. Golson, she is asking that everyone work on these to have them done by the start of the school year. And most of these do reflect the policies that were passed this past year. but have not been, the administrative procedures aligning with them have not been completed. So we want to get those done and ready to go for the start of the school year. And then the very last section had to do with policies that should be created to align with existing administrative procedures. And they have, these are ones that we actually had previously, but we never did address this past school year with several on information technology services. And I will say the information technology service, information security, you know, with all the language, all the stuff that's out there about cyber attacks and everything, we probably want to make that a priority because you know, if our system went down because of malware or something, it would probably disable us as a school system. So we probably want to ensure that we have a policy that does address that. And then these are other ones that we had previously that I didn't want to forget about, so I put them in there. There's nothing in a component 2, and that's because it says anyone that you reviewed and decide you don't need to address any policy that you've reviewed it, but you don't need to address. Well, you know, the ones that I review a lot of policies all the time, but I couldn't even tell you how many I reviewed to put into that section because, and I'm really looking for which ones we need to have up to date so that we don't have anything in there at this point. You know, it might be something we want to address down the road in 9340, because I'm not sure how really relevant that is. You know, when our whole goal is to ensure that we're up to date and that we have, you know, workable policies that really guide and direct the school system. And also the other thing I want to say is, so if you recall last year, Dr. Golson gave her recommendations, but now as a committee, then last year you added several policies. I think 9360 was one of them, 8100 was another, I think there was another one. So any other ones that you want to add to put into the work plan, I mean, that you want to incorporate, and then from there, last year, now this is how we did it last year, doesn't mean we have to do it this year, but then last year we took all these recommendations as well as the committee's recommendation and put together sort of a schedule for the year. We got through every policy we put on the schedule. We just did not were able to address every single recommendation because there's only so many meetings. So
thank you, Ms. Welsh. And I do want to second Mrs. Welsh's comment about our role as board members when it comes to the development of the work plan. That is partly why we wanted to present it today, to encourage you all and our other board colleagues as well to share their input and their opinions on policies they would like to see, because it's much better to hear them early on than afterwards. That way, Ms. Welsh is given the time to look at them, develop them if need be. So I see Vice Chair Fields' hand.
There are 2 areas that I would like to see us look at. One is intellectual property rights. Other county districts have a policy on intellectual property rights, and given our emphasis on CTE, I think it's really important that we have a policy that speaks to that. Okay. And then the second area is artificial intelligence. I think given and I see our chair grinning, given how much we're hearing about the applicability of artificial intelligence in schoolwork, that I think that we need to be ahead of the curve and have a policy that addresses that. So those would be the 2 areas that I can immediately think of at this point in time.
Thank you, Board Member Briggs.
Thanks so much, Chair Saron-Ruiz. Ms. Welsh, thanks so much for putting together that document. And I actually was really happy to see that the bus conduct was on there, because that was one of the policies I was going to recommend, was just given everything that's happened and in the recent violence that, it's an important discussion to have. Some additional ones that I was thinking we should consider are the personal education plan, which is AP 5130 is what it says on the website. But essentially that's to provide as a tool that it's an education plan that helps students and parents and guardians with the school counselor or for high school and graduation, college and career preparedness. And I'm thinking as we're thinking about career and technical education and how that factors in and really expanding programs in the county. I think that's something that's worth discussing. Plus, I think post-COVID, it would just be good to kind of identify like how we can update that specific policy, given the, the very different needs that students have right now. Another one is student use of social media in schools, and that's AP 5180. And I think Board Member Fields was the one who mentioned this, but just as a kind of as a FYI, I work for the Surgeon General, and he recently released an advisory on social media and its impact on youth. And I think, there's good stuff in there around what schools can do. So it's something that we should probably consider as, things to update. Another one that's a little bit different, I haven't found the name of the policy, so I need to find it, but it's around field trips. And there's a really specific process that schools have to go through, schools have to go through in Prince George's County. I talked to a few advocates around how the process is laborious, and because of that, unfortunately, lots of kids aren't able to go on field trips. There's like this long approval process. Buses can't be confirmed until there's approval, and then there's like buses need like months in advance to be able to book them. So it's really kind of the sequencing of everything leads to field trips not happening for kids. So it's something that I think we should probably just consider looking at. And then I don't have the name of the policy, but I can find it and send that to you. And then the last one is the release of certain student information. The only reason why I have that on there is AP 5126 is because it hasn't been updated since 2003. I think that might be the oldest that I've seen, at least in the list that we have here. So, 2003 is a long time. And I think release of certain student information probably should be considered.
Okay.
Board Member Bruce Struthers.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to add a topic that I think falls under where we might have like the student falls under like the rights and responsibilities AP around safe gun storage letters to parents, and adding it to the handbook that we all signed, that we've read it and confirm. And Dr. Goldson may already be moving on that. She may have already said that, but I just want to make sure that we codify in policy where we stand on these issues. And LA Unified is one of the leading school districts that they actually do a separate letter that the parent has to send back. I think our roles and responsibilities handbook would be a logical place to have that. So that I'd ask for that review. I'd also ask for us to review the HBO 515, which I believe it is listed even by MABE as likely to pass next year. And this is the one that really gets deeper into active shooter drills. Elementary level parents and national organizations focused on this are definitely critical of the active shooter drill at that age level, and how they're conducted, and how in making changes. And I think we need to hear that out, because I think if we could start talking about it and leading on it before legislation, because we might actually want to then testify. So that is one I think we should definitely be looking at. And I think another one that just jumped out at me, I noticed the home and hospital, and I did think it was very significant. I saw a memo from out of a state board meeting that mental health is now covered in home and hospital, which is huge and going to be game changer for some of our families that have been very upset around not being able to access those services for their children who are home because of depression or anxiety or otherwise. And I think that's just something significant for the board to be sure we're looking at. So those are some things that stood out to me. I will say I want to thank everyone. I'm going to take a personal privilege second. This is my final meeting of policy and governance. I've served on this committee for most of the last 4 years. I have requested to the chair to diversify my service next year. But I've done it all, and I am here for all that history that I've been through, and look forward to working with my colleagues who do stay on this committee or join this committee. And I do want to say to you, Chair Saron Ruiz, what a pleasure it's been to work with you. And I'm just going to give you my virtual clap out for you. Just want to thank you. It's been a great, you've done a great job, and you've set a bar, and I'm very excited for our future student members of the board to follow in your footsteps and know they have this opportunity to lead. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have my little speech at the end. So thank you. So regarding the development plan, I see Ms. Chair McIntyre followed by Ms. Welsh.
Yes, I'm not sure that this is a policy, but I know that the charter office keeps asking me about the board's philosophy around charter schools. So I think, Mr. Fields, one of the things that we need to grapple with next year is developing something and then deciding if it should be in a policy or if it should be in a bylaw, or where it should be. But they are encouraging us to do that as a board.
Agreed.
Ms. Welsh.
So I wanted to comment on Board Member Booster Struthers' recommendation for the safe gun storage. Was that it? Yes, the a letter that would be attached to the Student Rights and Responsibility Handbook. I will follow up with Dr. Faison, who heads up student services and is responsible for that administrative procedure, because that might be something she's even been thinking about, and we might be able to get it into, because we'll be making revisions. Every year we make revisions to the handbook. So that would be something maybe we could go ahead and get added for this upcoming school year, which would be good. And then can I just ask one clarifying question of Board Member Mickens? Are you saying our charter office or someone else's public charter school office?
Our charter office. The ladies that we keep meeting with about our folks, pre-GCPS folks.
Oh, okay.
Okay, they really believe that will help us if the board can coalesce around a philosophy that the board embraces, and it will help them.
So, and I will say that policy that went through for public comment, I did add language in there that did talk about what you had requested, that the board, the board and the charter office will work collaboratively to ensure that there's adequate time within the 120-day time period, so both parties can evaluate the policy. I know that was a concern.
Right. So I guess what I would suggest is that maybe Mr. Fields, myself, and the ladies from that charter office meet so that we can get clarity on what it is that they really want the board to do.
Okay.
Okay, because I don't believe it's in that policy now.
Okay. That sounds
okay.
good.
Thank you.
I think they're asking for a broader overview of the actual board goals and policies toward charter schools.
Yes, they're looking for our disposition as a board on how we feel about charters. Because I think it's come up a number of times, and they've seen the sort of differing opinions on the board, and they would just like to have some sort of unified statement that provides clarity on where as a district we stand on charter schools.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, any further discussion regarding the work plan? All right, seeing none. Ms. Welsh, I hope you got all that down. You're ready to develop a plan.
I did, but I'm always very glad we have a video too.
Absolutely, absolutely. All righty, moving along So follow-ups from previous meetings will be posted on board docs. The next Policy and Governance Committee meeting is Tuesday, August 22nd at 5 p.m. So you guys get a little 2-month sabbatical. But closing remarks. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I just want to take the time and say that when I started the school year coming in as vice chair of the committee, I never thought I would elevate to actually have to be the chair. And so it truly was quite surprising. And at first it was very like, wow, how am I gonna do this? But I definitely just want to take the time to thank Chair Mickens Murray for your mentorship and support for me to feel comfortable to elevate to that role. To feel that, as a student, I can actually lead a committee for the board, because I absolutely feel like I hope I've been able to do a good job because of what you have taught me. I want to thank my vice chair, Mr. Fields, for helping me navigate chairmanship and being a support anytime I was needed, whenever I couldn't be there. Just having that support. I definitely want to thank my committee colleagues, our council, for bearing with me through my meetings. I know I've tried to get through them quick, but sometimes we just got to talk a bit. But thank you. And then also for your how diligent all of you are in terms of your insight when it comes to policymaking, all of your input, and just how collaborative everyone was willing to be with each other. We at times we never always were, there were times where we butted heads, but everyone was amenable to finding that middle ground and being able to give something to Miss Welsh to bring us. So thank you for that. And then I do want to thank Miss Welsh and Miss Adlin. So Miss Welsh, you guys are the backbone of the committee. Miss Adlin making sure that the recording, that the notes, that everything is being done together so that everyone is in the meeting, sending those emails, making sure everyone remembers that there's a meeting. So making sure all of that's going on. And then Ms. Welsh for just all the support, and just, oh my gosh, this committee would not be the committee without Ms. Welsh. So thank you so much to you, and just all your intelligence and wisdom when it comes to policy. So I truly have appreciated that. I have learned a lot from you. And so I truly wanted to take the time to thank you. So thank you all for allowing me to be your chair. It's been an amazing last couple of months. But with that, are there further additional comments from colleagues?
Yes, sir.
We're gonna clap.
I just want to say that you are a tough act to follow. I really mean that in all sincerity. I think you represent what we hold up to be the highest ideal of a student in our school district. And when I think about the role of the student member on the board, and I was so glad when the legislature gave you more power, because I believe that it's deserving. And I am hoping to have a discussion with our legislative delegation this year, because since they have given the student member of the board more authority, and I think you are the role model, I think they should allow 16-year-olds to vote in school board elections, because they are giving you that authority as a student member of the board. And I think you represent what we all believe our school district produces. And I just want to say thank you. Congratulations. You are now an alum of our school district, but I know you're not going far. And I think that, I know in the future we're going to be hearing a lot about you in our county, in our state, and I can't wait. So thank you.
And I want to ditto everything that Mr. Fields has said. And I also want to say to you, Saran Ruiz, we are still here. We are your friends. If you need anything, call us.
Yep.
We are a safety net. So you call us. We will not forget you. Okay, we're here for you. But I wish you the best. And I am so proud of you. I was telling Mr. Moody today how proud I am of you. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. All right.
Oh, I already went once. I echo everything. But you know, we do have an alumni association, and maybe you and Dr. Monica Goldson should be the new co-chairs. And you can a lot of alums. Bring in two, bring in the 32.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to chime in really quickly. I just want to say, Alfred, I think you did a fantastic job. Literally, I cannot even imagine how you did so well. I mean, it's just like, it's crazy to think, you know, that you are 18, so you were able to kind of just man the ship. So congratulations on that, you know, on the next steps that you have ahead of you. And also, I think really take to heart what Chair Bickensberry shared. I mean, it's something to have like a community of adults who have so much wisdom, I think, to share with you as you kind of going into this new journey. You know, it's a network that you can always tap into. So, you know, don't forget about that. And we know you'll be down the street, but, you know, you always have us as a support system.
Yes.
And I would like to say one thing is that, first of all, when I came to this committee, I need to say that it was a pleasure working with board member Mickens Murray, and I thought she helped make it quite easy as we move forward. And then you came on, Alvaro, and you were wonderful. You were excellent to work with, and you were very helpful. You had very good thinking about lots of different things and how we work through coming up with like what would be on the agenda and solutions to problems and stuff. And so it's been a fabulous pleasure on my part to be able to work with you. And also, as far as the committee, I think this is the most excellent committee. I love working with this committee. All of you do such a great job, and you take your work so seriously and really try to come up with excellent things for our kids and our school community. So it's just a pleasure to work with everyone on the committee. And congratulations, Alvaro, and good luck with everything you do in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. Thank you. All righty. So with that, colleagues, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
A second.
Second.
It's been properly moved in second to adjourn the June 13th, 2023 Policy and Governance Committee meeting. Any objections? All righty, hearing none for the last time, meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.